In his book Leviathan, the philosopher Thomas Hobbes sets out one of the first visions of the modern state. And his vision is pretty terrifying. He argues that we should give up all our rights to an all-powerful sovereign, and that we have absolutely no ability to challenge any of the sovereign's decisions. But what I think is most terrifying isn't just the Leviathan State itself, it's the way Hobbes gets us there. It's his method. Every piece of Hobbes's argument is logical, rational, reasonable. But when you put the pieces together, you arrive at something that looks a lot like totalitarianism. Why do humans form into states? For Hobbes, the answer is simple. Just look at what life is like outside of a state. Look at life in a state of nature. In a state of nature, there's no king, there's no parliament, there's no authorities at all. It's every man for himself. We may think that Hobbes's Leviathan is terrifying, but for Hobbes, the state of nature is even worse. In the state of nature, we all have a right of nature. The right of nature means that whatever we can get our hands on is ours. There is no concept of fair and unfair, right and wrong, or justice and injustice. This means that humans will constantly be fighting each other. We will be in a state of permanent war, of all against all. That's why Hobbes famously said that life in a state of nature is nasty, brutish, and short. Given this, it's rational for us to seek peace, to find a way to end the fighting. Hobbes says the way to do this is to give up our right of nature. We should instead pick one person and give our right of nature to them. We should all enter into a covenant, or a promise, with each other to obey this person. And we call this person the sovereign. That's how, in Hobbes's view, a civil state is formed. This means there'll be one authority that can impose order and keep the peace. The war of all against all will end. This all seems kind of reasonable. It doesn't even have to be a single person we name as the sovereign. It doesn't have to be a dictatorship. Hobbes says the sovereign could be an institution, like a parliament, made up of multiple people. But there are some pretty troubling conclusions that follow on from Hobbes's logic. To create the Leviathan State, we all enter into a covenant with each other. We promised each other to obey the sovereign, but the sovereign didn't promise us anything. Therefore, the sovereign has no obligations to us. This means that if at some later point we don't agree with what the sovereign does, we have absolutely no right to protest them. The sovereign is not accountable to us at all. Hobbes takes this even further and says that if the sovereign asks us to do something that we believe to be wrong, we should do it anyway. Because if we didn't, we'd be breaking our covenant, and if we broke our covenant, we'd be back in a state of nature. The Leviathan state might be bad, but for Hobbes, the state of nature is always worse. This might all sound quite theoretical. Back in the real world, nobody asked me or you to enter into a civil state. We didn't have any choice. Well, Hobbes disagrees. He thinks that we do have a choice, right now, to leave the civil state if we want to. So let's imagine we did. We declare ourselves in a state of nature. The laws don't apply to us anymore. We can do whatever we want. Except for Hobbes, it's perfectly legitimate for the state to then use violence against us to try and force us back into the covenant. But that's coercion. If we're being forced, then it's not really a choice. Again, Hobbes disagrees. For him, we still do have a choice. Even if an agent of the state put a gun to your head and said, enter the covenant or die, that's still a choice. You still have options. And it seems unfair to make someone choose under coercion. But remember, we've declared ourselves in a state of nature, so the concept of fair and unfair doesn't exist for us anymore. So now hopefully you can see why Hobbes is willing to countenance such an all-powerful Leviathan state. For him, order, even an order that might seem wrong or unjust, is better than no order at all. Because with no order at all, with no state to exercise authority over everyone, the concepts of right and wrong don't even exist.